I'm going to ask you to participate in some of this. It may not be decorum, but I want you to shout some stuff out. Now more than ever, the crisis in policing drives us to talk about the practical application of the evidence base that I heard referred to earlier tonight as informed decision-making. Well, you've made a decision to come and listen to me on a very hot evening, and I appreciate it. Thank you. It is cool in here. I couldn't resist this title when I was invited to speak. Within the space of a year as Chief in Avon and Somerset, I almost lost my job when the Colston statue was toppled into the harbour, and I defended the actions of the officers not to start a riot in Bristol with the black community, which would have reverberated around Britain and indeed the world, I believe. And then less than 12 months later, when I stood on the steps of Bridewell, when it had been literally trashed in a riot, and I made a commitment to hunt down the people responsible, make sure they didn't sleep easily at night. Over 100 were arrested, by the way, and the first riot charges ever laid in the southwest of England. The first in the United Kingdom since 2011, I believe. On both occasions, it wasn't just right. It was too little or too much. And I do believe, Larry, that the science and the data you talk about can help inform this. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the role of the College of Policing, which I'm privileged to be the Chief Exec of. But picking up the theme of just right, I wanted to pick up just right by my own rule of 8. The rule of 8 rights in policing, we could call it the magic source of policing. Who are the right officers? Right through to the 8th right, what is the right leadership? Now, I'm going to try and provoke your thought on this journey as I talk through this about things that you may well disagree with me on. But one of those questions is, why is it in policing, a profession which, if I think members of the public were asked, tell me about a profession that should be expert in gathering evidence, they'd talk about policing. Why is it so difficult that a profession, claims to be a profession, that finds it so difficult to accept the concept of evidence-based policing that you've all been involved in developing? Just to challenge our thinking about are we winning, the College of Policing hosts a website on a crime reduction toolkit. I won't ask you to guess this, but in the last month alone, it's had 10,700 hits. What do we think the most popular hit was on that website? Anyone, any thoughts? I know that Larry's going to be pleased with one of them. You, give me any of the top 3. What do you think? Knife crime? Hot, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Did you say that, Scott? No. It sounded a bit Leeds to me. Actually, hotspots was second, problem solving was first, and I don't think barracks here, but body-worn video was third. Now, I'm not going to spend too long dwelling on this. These are beautiful slides, but they were made for me while I was away, and so the builds are incredibly quick. It's not a memory test. You're going to have to catch these quickly, these builds. I'm not going to dwell on the context because you are an incredibly informed audience, but just to say that a record number of police forces are under poor performance scrutiny, 6. I haven't done the head count, but given that the Met and GMP are in there, I would say that that's over a third of policing in England and Wales is what we would call special measures. We are in a boom or bust cycle. You heard my brief anecdote about public order, too hot, too cold. Officer numbers. Under austerity, they were reduced by a significant amount, as were police staff. They've grown. They're growing by 20,000. We have experienced in my time as a chief officer a swing from very intense centralised political oversight under the Blair administration to super localism under Theresa May. And certainly reflecting on my leadership of 2 forces, there's only one reason to completely centralise, and that's to decentralise again, and vice versa, of course. There is this natural pendulum swing. So what I would say is the system, more than ever, if we call it a policing system, needs balance. A system that doesn't have balance basically has revolution or dramatic change. Now, that might be a good thing, but I don't think policing needs more boom and bust. I think policing needs performance, delivery, and stability. So I would say that the college professes and has an ambition to be a systems leader with others in achieving this. Where we suffer from boom or bust, it's important to keep your eyes on the end game, on the strategic goals. An incredibly important document that the college produced with the 10 perennial problems in policing. I'd commend it to you all. Wherever you work in the world, the 10 perennial problems in policing will flip round again and again, and indeed our 2040 vision. I'm going to speculate for a moment, moving on. Why does evidence-based policing find it difficult to get a foothold in policing? Well, first of all, I'd say that policing is suspicious of academia. I think we all know that. There's no secret. Another reason is that policing demands immediate results. Our 24/7, our political structure demands immediate results, and gathering evidence and conducting research takes time. We know that. And I think probably that the most regrettable of these three reasons is that anecdote, however powerful it is, very often trumps data and fact. So I'm going to talk about factfulness. Like, what does the data tell us about things? Now, you're an informed audience. You're amongst the greatest minds in policing, past, present, and future, I would venture to suggest. How many firearms incidents? I've picked this because this week, the number of firearms incidents in England and Wales is being released on Thursday. So the last figures that were released were in 2021. How many authorised firearms deployments were there in 2021 a year? Have a guess, anyone? What interesting people from another jurisdiction, what do you think? How many times did policing in a country of about 60 million deploy? Yeah, good guess. So the exact figure is 18,262. How many times were shots fired? Someone else? Go on, have a guess. The chap was looking quizzical. 27. Where are you from? Belfast. I thought so. I'm not including Belfast. This is England and Wales. 4. Are you surprised? So look, like, what is your impression of the world? What's the reality of it? So the reality of policing is very often misunderstood. Take stop search, one of the most vexed areas of evidence-based research and the heat of public debate. 695,000 stop searches in the last year. That's up 24%, but it's still 41% below the high tide of that when that was checked. 69% of them drugs-related. Is that good? Do we think that's too much, too little for the drugs? I would say it's probably too much, depending on what our intention is. When we come on to Section 60, stop searches, some of you may not necessarily know what it is, but it's very heated. The number of Section 60 searches conducted by police officers in England and Wales per officer is 0.15 in that year. So actually, it's interesting what this data tells us about whether we are getting this just right. When I was mulling over the idea of just right, before I move on to my octet of just rights, if someone would say just right to me, what's the first thing that comes into my mind? What's the first thing that comes into your mind? I'm thinking when I sit in the barber's chair. You know, you want it just right, don't you? Which actually, coming back to Larry's point, it is just right in policing an art or a science. I'd say it's a mixture of both, not enough science. I would say as a reflection of being in policing 35 years and a chief in 2 forces, quite often it's not what you do, it's the way you do it. That's certainly the case in my experience around stop searches and interactions with the black communities that I've been responsible for policing and working in partnership. So if it is a mixture of art and science, and if there's a frustration about getting it to get traction, what would be, I was trying to conjure this up, Larry, what would be the most drop-dead piece of evidence base that you've thought, my goodness, we've got it this time for policing, we've got it? Which one would you say?
That you could cut out stop and search in 95% of the landmass and not have any crime go up.
I thought you'd say hotspots. So yeah. I see what you mean. The police. Yeah. One of my frustrations as a chief is operationalising things. So I wonder if we were to perfectly operationalise hotspot policing in the optimum, just right way in every police force in England and Wales, what does the science tell us about how much crime and victimisation we would cut? And I would like, through my work with colleagues at the College of Policing, to turn policing into much more of a data-driven science where we could start making sensible decisions. So I'm going to have a little look at this rule of 8 then. The right officers. Now, I would like you to think about these rights through the evidence of evidence-based policing. You hear people talk about people being our most important asset. It's easy, isn't it? We've heard it said often. Now, what's the cost of failure? I tried to find out exactly how much it would cost to train a police officer. We don't categorically know, which is a shortcoming in itself, but it's many tens of thousands. What skills do we want? Well, I think we want some traditional skills: integrity, courage, honesty. But we also want some 21st century data and digital skills. We want a workforce which is representative. The days when I joined the police in the 80s, it really was about, by and large, 6 burly men breaking up a pub fight, and there was a height restriction. I joined policing not long after a rule was dismissed that if you became pregnant and you're a woman in policing, you had to leave. I mean, either that shows I'm old, or policing's come on a long way in quite a short time. When I do exit interviews and people tell me the job's not what it was, is it? I do sometimes say thank goodness for that, because I do remember the 80s. So we need to attract officers who are compassionate, critical thinkers, morally courageous, as well as vocationally driven people. Now, we have to be factful also about things. You will all have read material in social media predominantly about the police uplift and what sort of people are joining policing. Well, I met a lot of them that joined my old police force. Uplift caused a revolution in recruitment, actually, and my academic background at Liverpool University was geography, and geography is like many other subjects. It had a catastrophe theory. Is the world changed through the geomorphology, through major events, or consistent change over many millennia? Well, actually, the reality is there's arguments for both, but the catastrophe theory, whether you're talking about chemistry, maths, geography, or policing, I think is important. How does a system achieve a very significant change by a relatively small adjustment in one variable? Now, actually, COVID isn't a relatively small adjustment, and it's not one variable, but it intrigues me how we can change the policing system through minor adjustments in single variables, and I think we can do it, and I think that's where we get value for money. So, thinking about the facts of Uplift, we put it online. College of Policing, working in partnerships with MPCC. About 38,000 people have been through that online assessment. 73.5% have passed. That may or may not surprise you. The online assessment, not the whole thing. But actually, the impact on ethnic minority applicants, 64% passed in relation to the old scheme of 56. In relation to black applicants, 58 compared to 49. Now, we don't know why. It would be helpful to know why, and it still isn't on parity with white applicants. But I would say that that's progress, and I do know that through the many routes that now operate into policing, we are achieving a much more diverse workforce in terms of skills and knowledge and background. You will have heard the story that all new recruits are very young, and it's true, some are young. Let's have a look at the facts and data. Under the old route into policing, 46% were under 26. So just under half are under 26. Under the new routes, for the first time ever, we have reliable national data, 52% are under 26. So actually, it's not true. And you saw some of the things coming up, that the people coming into policing are all 19, they're snowflakes, they're frightened to go out in the dark, etc., etc. But doesn't the media, and policing, I have to say it, love a bad story? Okay, Larry referred to his cohort study. I firmly support the idea of a cohort study to try and study the sort of people coming into policing and what happens to them, good things and bad things. I seriously hope that you get to realise that ambition. The right training. Some more myths. What is the right training? And I've been lucky enough to swap stories with other jurisdictions from around the world about the right training. The myths don't start around who those recruits are. Let's look at the facts. So you will have heard on social media that up to 50% of new recruits are leaving. Has anyone heard stories like that? Do you think they're true? People do think they're true. So let me tell you the facts. Since November 2019, under the degree holders apprenticeship scheme, 5.8% attrition. You know, other sectors would love that, 5.8. That's the degree holders. Under PCDA, 6.5. Under police now, 7.3. And last of all, and it's still being delivered in several forces, IPRDP, 10.9%. So actually, the new routes into policing do not appear to be suffering the attrition that people would attribute it to them. And by the way, I wouldn't say they're perfect, but I'll come back to that. In terms of the biggest survey of how those officers felt about those training, I'm going to give you three facts. They're opinion-based facts, so Larry might disagree, they're facts. It's a survey. Survey of 4,000 officers. The new training routes, how well prepared are you for your role? 79% compared to 60% IPRDP. How confident do you feel in terms of the training you've delivered and the job? 77% compared to 58%. And perhaps the most important of all, I'm going to come back to this, how equipped do you feel to serve the communities in your area? 77% compared to 62%. I'll come back with a personal anecdote on that. There is much more work needed on these new routes into policing to optimise them, but actually we need to remember why we made this change in the first place. The old training routes were not fit for purpose. Now let me tell you a very short anecdote. When I joined the police in 1987, I went to Charlemont, a regional training centre, straight from university, and actually I wanted to change the world. I wanted to make it better. I had a fleeting idea of being a politician, but thankfully I put that to bed. So I joined the police. And when we got to week 8, we learnt about the Sexual Offences Act. And you can imagine the nudging that was going on about this is interesting. Well, I learnt for the first time in my life that it was unlawful for same-sex people to engage in a relationship unless it was private consent, no more than 2 people, both over the age of 21. Now, that law has been repealed. It's changed. PC 221, it was called. Now, I put my hand up and said, Sarge, yeah, PC Marsh, what do you want? So I didn't know that was against the law. I didn't join the police to do that. Are you telling me that we really enforce it? And actually, you imagine how well that went down? I was utterly ridiculed, humiliated, and nicknamed PC 221 for the rest of my training, and thereafter by the people who knew me from training school. I almost left. Now, actually compare that to what we need to do, bearing the context that you understand about. We need to build a workforce that is skilled to solve problems, that uses evidence, that asks questions, that challenges paradigms and ways of thinking, that thinks critically. So the college does set a curriculum. It reviews it every year, and the curriculum does all of that. It includes new types of offending, violence against women and girls, modern slavery. It includes resilience, well-being, ethics. But critically, it includes evidence-based policing and research. That's a critical foundation to any profession. Now, there's more work needed on those new routes, but I do believe that that is the way to go. So the right development. I'm on to the third right development. What is the right development? Now, I've been in policing 35 years, as I said. CPD, well, everyone laughs, doesn't it? It doesn't really happen unless you're either in a specialism or you're going to get promoted. And actually, even the getting promoted bit during austerity, the development stopped. And I think we're paying the price for it in many respects now. I tried to dig out some figures to be factful on this. A counter-terrorism specialist firearms officer receives 30 weeks initial training, which is a lot. They then receive, I know this is not CPD, but I'm talking about an investment in people, 260 hours of refresher training annually. If you go on response, you'll be lucky to get 5 or 6 days per year. Half of them will be cancelled for operational reasons, and the other half won't be particularly well delivered. What is just the right amount of CPD? Now, I put this up here because in Avon and Somerset, I developed the concept for officers and the force of a digital twin. For officers, everything you touch leaves a digital footprint. So the data tells you an awful lot about what the officers are doing. I democratized it. I gave it to them so that they could learn and improve, and they did. I'll come back to that. We're looking at developing a digital twin. We have, actually, it's just not automated yet, for police forces. How much do they draw down knowledge from the College of Policing? How much do they contribute knowledge and skills to the College of Policing, if we believe that it's the right thing to do? There is a very wide disparity. You know, which digital courses do chiefs choose to mandate, or do they just let people get on with and pick the bones over it? Do we optimize that precious CPD time, or do we regard it as, let's use the language, an abstraction to be minimized, let alone send someone on a master's course? So I believe that sharing this sort of data will help people make better choices. And this data, by the way, can be drilled down to department, force, department, team, and individual. And what sort of development an individual chooses to engage in, let alone is mandated, should tell a story, if the investment is any good, in their performance. So there's something of the future of just the right amount of development. The right activity. Now, this is where evidence-based policing really comes into its own. We could talk about hotspots, non-judicial outcomes such as CARA, and many more things that we'll hear about at this conference. The problem is, in many cases, that the evidence base for operational officers, let alone at 2 in the morning, isn't practical or available enough for them to make decisions. Sometimes it isn't developed quickly enough. This is a criticism, I think, justifiably levelled at the College of Policing. We need academic rigour, but in the dynamic world, which is only ever getting quicker, we also on occasions need speed. This looks about right. Let's push it out a bit. I said that the sector views academia with some suspicion. We need to make sure that we address it so that the knowledge and learning coming out of our academic institutions is properly implemented. Now, I was just trying to think about where this was badly exemplified. Now, many of you will have points of view on this. Stop search, obviously. Why is it we can't agree on what just the right amount of stop search is? I tell you one thing we must not do is allow it to become a political football. It must remain within the realm of operational decision making. But actually, if we take something where there is, I would say, an overwhelming evidence base of this is better and more efficient, cheaper, if we want to use the grubby language, is DARA risk assessments for domestic abuse. And yet only 3 forces have implemented it. So when I say the College of Policing is needed now more than ever, it's because that system, that heavily localized system with all of the benefits that localism offers you, unless it is glued together, and one of those glues is the evidence base, it is knowledge, it is skills, and one of the things the college can do is mandate it, then actually we will constantly wrestle with the perennial problems that I talked about before. Just in terms of the power of democratizing data, the digital twin that I talked about of officers in Avon and Somerset that had everything from a heat map of their patrol to data quality, to victim satisfaction, to stop search, to find rates, everything was on there, bar the back end of body-worn video. I came into work one morning and I heard the news that I heard too often, that the police were alleged to have mistreated a young black lad in the centre of Bristol, something that could start a riot. So first response, let me see the body-worn video. And it was alleged that the officer had kicked a lad who was already under arrest for a street robbery using a knife while he was in handcuffs. Clearly unacceptable use of force. I was told he didn't have his body-worn video switched on. How disappointing. Right, okay. Tell me, when was the last time he used his body-worn video? Busiest police station in Avon and Somerset. The staff officer came back and said he hasn't switched on for 6 months. So my next question, is he corrupt, is he incompetent, or both? I was able to sack him very quickly. He went to prison. But actually, I turned to my data scientists and said, within 5 working days, you're going to put the back end of body-worn video on the digital twin. And one of the things that frustrated me was that the stop search body-worn video compliance levels were about 75% with the camera turned on. And I said, as chief, you must turn your camera on, stop search. Now, it's easy to make excuses, isn't it? But actually, within 2 weeks of the back end of the body-worn video going on the digital twin, compliance had gone up to over 95%. That just shows the power of democratization, because I gave the officers their digital twin. I said, you use this to learn and improve. And that way, you can actually very quickly focus your learning, your performance interventions on the people that just don't get it. Because we know most police officers and people in policing do get it. They want to do the right thing. The right behaviours. So I began talking about context, and actually the burning issue of the moment is probably trust, confidence, legitimacy. Probably in my memory, the biggest challenge that policing has faced since the publication of the Macpherson report into the murder of Stephen Lawrence. But actually, trust, confidence, and legitimacy is not necessarily an outcome in its own right. It is simply an enabler for us to have the permission and consent and support of our communities to do what we do, police with their support. I started to mull over and reflect on the problems that had led to the resignation of the Metropolitan Commissioner, Cressida Dick. Actually, it wasn't a failure to tackle knife crime. If you look at crime rates in London, including now homicide, they're pretty much, if the figures are correct, all going the right way. The real crisis came from concerns about the way in which women and girls were addressed, ways in which the police engaged with the black community, ways in which the police tackled bad apples, if we call it that, or indeed endemic corruption, whichever end of the scale that you want. We still have got a significant amount of unfinished business in policing, and I mentioned Hillsborough. That isn't finished yet. There's still lessons to be learned from that. So if we want to make progress on the right behaviours, and I'm thinking back to my days and my bumpy ride at Sharpmile when I had the audacity to question, and by the way, my closing report, I wish I had a copy of it still, said PC Marsh would do better if he took the advice of his superior officers. Imagine that. Imagine where I've got to today if I'd taken their advice. But actually, if we're serious about wanting a more representative workforce, actually we've got to allow people to be themselves in policing, the right behaviours, be themselves. I've been lucky enough to spend some time with policing around the world, and I've asked many police chiefs in America, you would appear to have a very representative workforce around ethnicity. Why is it, then, you would say, that you're still experiencing this lack of trust with the black communities? And actually what the community activist groups would say in those areas is you make them blue. You make them all the same. Now, actually, that's quite an insult to people's individuality, isn't it? But we need to create an environment where people can be themselves and succeed because of who they are. I don't think our misconduct processes are right at the moment. I judicially reviewed a decision by an independent, legally qualified chair in Avon and Somerset who did not sack a police officer for making a racist comment. So I judicially reviewed that. I felt it was unacceptable to have that person in the force. I lost it. So I would personally say that if chiefs are going to be held responsible for the right behaviours of their officers and staff, they do need to have the ability to manage it. I've talked about policing's relationship with the black community. Hillsborough isn't the only legacy problem we've got. There is a problem of the history of our relationship with the black community. When I was recruited into Avon and Somerset, within a small number of weeks, white bloke that was born in Toxteth in Liverpool but grew up in Cornwall was sitting in a riot van with 5 other police officers at the end of Ashley Road. And how did I feel? Felt a little bit frightened. But actually, this is not about me. How do you think the black community felt about those 6 black officers that had no understanding of their community and what they wanted from their police force? So actually, that's why I am particularly pleased that new recruits, as part of the PEQF, now will learn about the history of problems between the black community and policing in England and Wales, so that they can more appropriately deliver their policing services. Now, that's not woke. That's doing the right thing as far as I'm concerned. And what I said to my higher educational institution provider in Avon and Somerset was, I am sick and tired of either excusing or apologising or defending police actions which may be procedurally correct, but they're culturally incompetent. Now, if we can deliver our training just right, that's a significant step in the right direction. And of course, we will be writing the Code of Ethics, rewriting it to be much more than words on a wall or words of things we shouldn't do, but words which we can turn to when we have to make a difficult decision on one of the most difficult days of our professional lives. So that will be something you'll see more in consultation about later this year. The right oversight. I'm not going to dwell too long on this. Many police chiefs, and there's some robust retired police chiefs in the room, have had some stormy relationships with their governance and oversight. I would say just the right oversight is part of the magic sauce. Like if our pursuit is outstanding policing, we've got to get all of these just rights. An example of something I wouldn't have done, were it not for the oversight, is around call handling. Avon and Somerset, for a period, and I was chief, just published top of the call handling performance. Now, that wasn't because I went into that force with a burning mission to improve call handling, but the Police and Crime Commissioner said, I am sick and tired of people telling me, and the first thing I want you to do is sort it out. Now, actually, it took data science, it took leadership, it took process change, and a little bit of technology to put it right. It didn't take very much extra money. And actually the efficiency savings through doing it right and avoiding the bounce-back calling were astonishing, over £4 million. So there is a place for just the right governance, which is why in the fundamental review of the College of Policing, we are looking to be everyone's College of Policing and provide support for police and crime commissioners to help them get it just right. The right outcomes. We've talked about the issue of trust and confidence, but actually we are experiencing a crisis around outcomes. Rape and serious sexual offences, for example, less than 2% sanctioned solved rate. And it is one of my frustrations that even when we find the evidence to say this will work better, and I've referenced DASH risk assessments, DARA, as opposed to DASH, we struggle sometimes to get policing to adopt it. The only thing that I would say about this, if there is room for a systems player like the College of Policing in a devolved landscape of policing, we do need to use all of the levers at our disposal to ensure that there is compliance, not a very nice word, is it? Struggle to say it, compliance, in the most important areas. So it's highly likely that the college will write a code of practice on violence against women and girls, what we require chief constables to be mindful of in the delivery of their services. I'm pleased to say that in the very near future we will launch something called an evidence-based performance improvement team. We'll be drawing on much of the good work of the people in this room to help support forces to improve performance, hopefully before engagement under police performance scrutiny, but certainly those PPOG forces. Right now, I said I was from Liverpool. I couldn't resist this. It'll upset some of you. But in terms of the 8 rights and just right, and is it about what we do or the way we do it, there is so much to be said for leadership, so much to be said. If you spend a moment and allow your minds to think about the time in which you felt most fulfilled in your career, just think about why you felt fulfilled in your career. It's a conversation like having with people who are getting promoted. And they'll talk about making a difference. So actually, I call it keep it basic. If you point people involved in policing in the direction of their vocation, they're going to work really hard for you. So keep it real. Then they'll talk about team. People love teamwork. And then they'll talk about poor performance and standards being addressed. Then they'll talk about recognition. At the heart of all of these things, why do you think it was good? I had a great sergeant, a really good inspector. There will be someone that you will remember for all of the right reasons. And to be honest with you, and I'd rather not have started on this, it's why I finish on it. You think about the worst time in your career, all of those things are absent, and you can learn things in leadership terms from people who weren't doing it right. So one of the things that the college needs to rebuild, is a national leadership centre, which supports leadership development at every level. And I believe everyone in policing is a leader. You think about the difficult decisions our people need to make with no support whatsoever on the front line, let alone the tutor constables, the sergeants. The first area of leadership we've started with by issuing a new curriculum for a course, and we haven't got the resources to deliver it ourselves, is sergeant and first line supervisor. All of it is police staff and police officer. The strategic command course and PNAC is under review, and we will significantly change it because it's not delivering the numbers of people that we need, and it's not delivering the diversity of thought or representation that we need. So that's under consultation at the moment. I asked in preparation of this speech, under each area, what does the evidence base tell us on just right in these areas, these 8 rights? In terms of leadership, there's of course a lot written in terms of leadership, but we know that empowering and transformational leadership boosts performance of your employees. We know that it generates extra effort or motivation. We know that it delivers conscientiousness and engagement, which is why when I was talking to Larry and the team internationally earlier, the best people to bring onto this course, in my opinion, are the people that can take the learning that they've generated from their research, from their development opportunity, go back to their forces and up-and-coming leader and make it happen, deliver that change. And that's the investment that policing can make to get the most out of evidence-based policing. So look, I've tried to manage my time. I'm pretty much there. What I would say is there's 8 rights. just rights, and if you're looking for research areas on any of those just rights, then actually what policing should find is a very rich environment for the implementation of your findings. Would anyone like to ask me a question about anything at all?
Let me just repeat it for the Zoom. The question is, how do we get the public trust back in the curriculum for the police constable degree apprenticeship, I think, mostly, as well as the rest of the educational qualification framework?
Well, I think if we were going to do it again, we wouldn't do it this way. We would. There are a lot of lessons to be learned. What I've learned, certainly in my practical role as a chief before I took this role, and then observing other forces where it's done really well and some which are finding it more difficult, is that it has to be a true partnership between the higher education institution, who are responsive to the needs of the police officers and the force, the chief constable, and the College of Policing. They've all got a role to play. Where it has not gone well particularly is where it's outsourced. It's just gone out to the HEI to deliver it the way they want. Now, the recurring themes and problems that we've experienced are abstractions from the workplace, which actually need to be properly sequenced, pressure on students, so the amount of protected learning time that they have, and then the applied nature of the learning. So how practical is the learning to the job that needs to be done on the streets? Now, all three things need to be done, and the college is supercharging the learning and best practice. I've got a Deputy Chief Constable working with Joe Noakes, John Stratford, working with forces to help spread that. Now, what is going to happen is the old route, which I would say is well overdue replacement, IPODP, it is going to go. Like no ifs, no buts. The regulations have signed off by the Policing Minister. It will go at the end of March next year. And so police forces hopefully are working very hard with us to win that trust. I would say it's not really an issue for members of the public. We know that from all the research that I've seen, that actually for new recruits, the prospect of getting a qualification in their job, their profession, is very attractive. We know it's an attraction. For a small minority it's not, but it's attractive to many more. When you talk to the public about, you know what, you can join the police and we're a profession and you get all this learning and you will get a degree, actually most of them go, that sounds really good, in my experience. So the negative press, and I'm not saying it's unjustified, is where it hasn't been delivered particularly well and there's been some bad student experiences. But what I would say, don't believe everything you read on social media. It's not, you know that and I know that's not all true. And hopefully some of the facts I put up there showed you, crikey, there is a different story out there. How do we make that even better? And I think it's going to be a long haul. We know that, but if you look at other professions that have gone down the degree apprenticeship route, this is always a difficult and very ambitious thing to do. Last point I'll make, Norrie, because I know on the Strategic Command course, Rachel, who's here, does an input on evidence-based policing. People who go on the Strategic Command course get a good insight. Whether it's early enough and whether it's enough, just right, it is a matter for debate. But right at that end of the development, and right at the start, you've got evidence-based policing. Actually, we need to take the whole of policing with us. And if we did, I dare say they would look at the new routes into policing in a much more factful way about, let's have a look at this rather than just deal with our stereotypes and preconceptions of it.
My question is about the PCDA, Police Constable Degree Apprenticeship, and all the kind of amazing work that all those student police officers do over the course of their 3-year probation period. And in somewhere like Haven and Somerset, where we're recruiting maybe 300 a year, over the course of 3 years, that's nearly 1,000 dissertations, pieces of research work that are taking place. Is there any thought from the college centrally about how we might look at that kind of massive research that's taking place across the country, pick out the kind of the best bits, the nuggets, and share that in some way so that they don't just end up gathering dust somewhere?
So the college needs to be the receptacle of what works from a very strategic, in-depth level, right through to the what do I do at 2 in the morning. Now, some forces, some HEIs with their PCDA students or their DHEP students are not engaging in research. And actually, I would say that the most successful ingredients are where the HEIs are focusing on applied learning. So the research isn't for everyone. And that's probably something we need to continue to evolve, is how much do we engage them in their own research, and how much do we teach them what they need to know on the streets, if you see what I mean. I'm very interested in the idea of how we might consolidate those sorts of nuggets of learning. And I thought about one of the things that I know that Larry has done with hotspot research. I think I'm right in saying that similar research has been repeated, hasn't it?
80 times.
Yeah. So actually, you might say, well, what a waste of time. We know it works. Why don't we crack on with it? What I would say that there's a couple of things. One is it's the dance that we have to do. So if we want to embed more evidence base into policing, actually getting more people to learn, experience and know that this is the right thing to do and lead within their organisations and influence, that's not wasted effort, that's the dance we have to do for implementation. So what I would say is that the effort that they're going to with their research, however successful, however unsuccessful, however impactful, or however, oh well, that doesn't make much difference, is some of the dance that we have to do to develop inquisitive minds. So it's not, the fact that it isn't necessarily gathered up and collated is most definitely, it's not, we shouldn't be too sad about it. But I will have a think about the extent to which we could gather it up. So thank you for the question.